So Sushma, feel free to interrupt me if there is any questions on the chat. We can, of course, come
Fantastic.
back after 30 minutes, but if there is something urgent, I can definitely address it.
So fantastic.
Yeah.
Let me kick it off. Welcome, everyone. Um, good evening to all the folks who are joining us from India, and good morning to people from North America. We have a very interesting speaker today, Dr. Anand Rao. And this is a part of our commitment to everyone who is on the Second Careers platform. We want to continue to bring to you expert views on things that are topically very relevant to us, that impact us and impact our lives, not merely our careers. There is so much noise out there that we need people who are steeped in the fields to be able to distill for us what we need to do to deal with these kinds of technological changes, and I would also call them tectonic changes that are upon us. So we thought we would bring experts like Anand Rao, who is a distinguished professor at Carnegie Mellon for applied data science and AI at the Heinz School of Information Systems and Public Policy. But what really drew me to and drew us as Second Careers to Anand is the fact that he has a compendium of experience, not merely academic experience. He has academic experience. He has actual consulting experience at PricewaterhouseCoopers and other such reputable organizations. And he's also steeped in the world of venture creation, where there is a lot of innovation that gets unlocked. So we thought we'll make this session a very interactive session. And before we get on to the session, I just want to remind all of you, I know most of you are on our platform. We had over 200 people who registered. I see about 49 who have joined, and usually people, oh, that's gone up to 51 now. And I am expecting at least 100 people to show up, but anything over 70 would be considered very good, but 50 plus is fantastic. Today's session is a 90-minute session, and we are going to make it very interactive after the 30 minutes, okay? If you haven't registered as a professional on Second Careers, please do. Please update your profile, okay? We have many people who are hiring on our platform, so kindly register on our platform. With that, I am delighted to invite Dr. Rao. Over to you, Anand.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Sushma, and great to be on this platform. I know you introduced me. Just as a quick intro here, I'm actually seeing this as my third career. My first career, roughly a decade and a half, was in AI, more in the building of AI as part of Australian AI Institute in Australia. So spent around 15 years after my PhD plus that. So that's what I consider as my first career, very much a research line. Then, of course, the AI winter hit, and I got a couple of kids, and academic life, research life was not the thing, according to my wife. So I switched to consulting. So I did an MBA and switched into consulting and spent a couple of decades, more than two and a half decades in consulting, initially in strategy, and then also as things changed into more data analytics, AI, and as Shishma just mentioned, as part of PricewaterhouseCoopers as their global AI leader, as well as their innovation lead and practicing partner in various industry sectors. I retired in 2023 and was looking for the next change. So this is my third career as a full-time professor at Carnegie Mellon. And it's a very interesting school at Carnegie Mellon, which combines both the opportunities of AI, but also the societal impact of AI, the policy-related issues of AI. And throughout my career, I grew more interested not just in the technology and what it can do, but of course, the impact it has on people's lives, right? So, and how we use the technology in a more responsible manner is what I started getting more interested in as I worked with a number of different countries and their AI strategy. So that's the background around this world of AI, hyper reality, hype versus reality, I should say. We'll dive in. And this is a somewhat different kind of talk. When Sushma mentioned, hey, can you give a talk on world of AI, hype versus reality? I said, fine. And just, I think it was yesterday or maybe the day before yesterday, just a thought occurred to me, why should I just talk about hype versus reality? Can I put these AI to the actual test and test it out on what it answers and how it answers this very same question? So I'm going to first present my view using, obviously, I use AI extensively. So obviously, I'll go to the source material and show you more around my views. But then we'll spend maybe at least 10, 15 minutes diving into what AI is telling us, whether it is hype or reality, right? So again, we'll do that and then get into a more detailed discussion. So yeah, just a quick background on mine, right? So I think I've gone through that. So as Sushma mentioned, I'm still actively involved in the corporate world, in the VC world, and then also the academic world. So just two topics, right? So first is just talking about hype versus reality from my perspective, and then of course, putting AI to the test, right? So, and again, I'll be using multiple models. So you'll see where the state of the art is and all the things that people are claiming, you'll see it in practice. We'll actually go into some of these AI tools. And again, I can show and maybe after this talk, we can go more into the detail and give you some taste of it. AI hyperreality. This image was essentially constructed by OpenAI. They just released 2 days back a new model that integrates with the text. So they had a separate model for image, separate model for text. Now it's a much better model. And it was just in one prompt I got this. I just had to say, hey, can you give me a divider slide for PowerPoint where I'm giving a talk, and this will be a divider slide for hype versus hyper reality. And there it is, right? So that's what we have, right? So just today morning at 7:30, so it's 8 o'clock here. I just thought it'll be good to have just one slide on a 101 on how AI has evolved. And I didn't pull the slides. I just went to ChatGPT and said, I want a slide with X and Y axis where I can show the progression of AI from descriptive, diagnostic, predictive, prescriptive, generative, and adaptive, right? So, and again, it came up with this diagram here in 2 shots, right? So first shot, it was black and white. And the second time around, I asked it to make it in color. We'll keep that aside, but just to explain, we have all been talking about machine learning, data science, data analytics, and so on for quite some time. Of course, AI itself has existed for 60 years. Data science has been used by many companies, at least for the past couple of decades. And of course, the excitement over the past 2 years is more towards the generative AI. And then over the past year, it is to do agentic AI or adaptive AI. Now, early days, it was more getting the data, doing descriptive. Diagnostic is telling more what happened. Descriptive is what happened. Diagnostic is why it happened. Prescriptive is much more around what will happen if I don't do anything. That's sorry, predictive is what will happen. Prescriptive is if I know multiple things are going to happen, can you just tell me what is it that I need to do? So don't give me multiple options. Tell me the thing to do. That's prescriptive. Generative took us on a different path where it has actually started generating text, images, and writing very detailed stuff. That's generative. they were still very static. They were not very dynamic, although very powerful. Now you're getting into the agentic world where it's just much more adaptive. Agents themselves have existed for a long time, right? So I used to work in the 90s in agent-based modeling. Now they have been powered by LLM. So that's a quick 101 on evolution of AI. Now, this is, as I said, from the latest release of the integrated image and text model of OpenAI. I don't know if everyone has been carefully reading the words there. There is a spelling mistake. I'm sure some of you can catch that spelling mistake. Prescriptive, the P is missing. And interestingly, the older model, it could never get any of these words right. It'll be all jumbled. And just by looking at the jumble of words, you can know that it's generated by ChatGPT. But interestingly, although it's sort of close to perfection with just 2 prompts here, in the second prompt, I actually asked it to correct this, and it corrected, but incorrectly corrected it, if you like. So what I have to say for that, we all know to err is human, and AI is just mimicking the humans. To err is AI, right? So even though the models are great, that's probably the lesson that you need to take. It's great, but just verify. Prompt or ask, but make sure that you verify, right? So trust but verify is, I know, one of the big statements. I think President Bush made it. But in this case, yeah, you can ask whatever you want with the AI, but just make sure that you are, in some sense, checking it as well as verifying it. Now we'll dive into AI and all the excitement and buzz around AI. Obviously, there's a hype element there, and there is a reality element. So we'll try and see what is hype, what is real. I don't think I'll give a definitive answer, so you can make up your own mind as to whether it is hype or reality. But I'm going to give you a few facts here. So one thing that is for sure is the technological progress. Now, everyone in the AI world, or even just the technology world, over the past, I would say, 50, 60 years, knows about the Moore's law, right? So the computing power essentially doubling every 18 months, right? So Gordon Moore from Intel came up with this way back, I think in the 80s, talked about it. And then, of course, that's been true over the years, over the decades. Now, what's happening with respect to AI and intelligence, the intelligence, our way you measure it, is actually doubling every 3 months. Just sort of pause and think about that. So a model that was 3 months back, how powerful it was versus how powerful it is today. In 3 months, it is twice as powerful as what it was 3 months back. And that's the progress. Again, there's lots of details here. There is an organization, if you're interested in the details, you see this Nature paper that I'm referring here. There's an organization called METR Meter, which actually has a way of looking at various kinds of human-related tests, questions, large banks, and so on, which is how they are measuring how these AI get better and better, right? So everything is put through the test. You can claim that it's somewhat artificial, but nevertheless, it is a thing that humans are measured against, and they have some benchmarks so that you can compare the AI. Some of the charts that you see on the right. So again, the capabilities, there's a huge list of different types of capabilities that humans are good at. They catalog that and then see how good the AI gets and how good it gets and how fast it gets there. And there's a new notion of intelligence emerging. What is it that you as a human can do in a minute, in 5 minutes, in 1 hour, in a day, in a month, right? So think of that and then substitute the human with an AI. Can the AI be much better in a 1 minute question or a conversation, which I think in most cases it probably is already, other than a few extraneous cases. Where the individual experience matters, right? So that's something it cannot gain. Again, it's getting much better at 5-minute tasks or 1-hour tasks or even 1-day tasks, right? So that's the way people are thinking about AI. So you may not have something that's AI for all. There's a time-bound, time completion, time horizon AI that people are talking about. Again, the bottom line is the technology is moving very fast. That has a lot of implications for us personally, and also if you're managing or if you're running in a company. The 3-month cycle in corporate world is just too quick. By the time you even decide that you want to do an AI initiative, the AI is doubly more powerful. So you better think of what you can do in that 3 months and then plan in a very different way, right? So which again, corporates are not used to thinking of the capability doubling in 3 months, which in many cases goes to a third alternative. It's not buy, build or buy, it's build, buy, or wait, right? So if you just wait for a few more months, you'll have a much more powerful system and you'll have the time in which you are doing things or even less. So that raises interesting questions. Again, I'll leave that as an open-ended question. Now, the first thing is obviously the progress. Of course, the progress doesn't get unnoticed. There is a lot of money that goes into it. And that's the other thing, obviously, that has happened with AI over the past few years, but obviously accelerating since the ChatGPT release. And you can see both the deal value and the deal count in the VC ecosystem, so venture capital ecosystem. It's not just the venture capital, the private equity is also behind it, and corporate investing is also behind it. Of course, led by the tech industry, but I think also closely followed by many other industries like financial services, healthcare, retail, all of them have some kind of an AI initiative. So the rise in AI investments is clear here. In fact, the overall VC investments globally, I think, went down in 2024 compared to 2023, but the share of AI in that actually went up, both in US and elsewhere. So now roughly 46.4%, almost half of all investments going in is AI related. Having said that, almost any company today which receives funding also tag AI, and more importantly, tag agentic. Not all of them are, in fact, agentic, right? So we'll look at a few codes later on. So that's the rise in investment. So technology progresses, people with money go behind it, right? So again, there are various economic reasons as well, right? I think there's a lot of money, cheap money available post-COVID, looking for investment, and crypto crashed and people just went behind AI. So there's a little bit of that happening as well. It's not just the AI progress, it is the availability of cash post-COVID, and then also some of the other factors in the market is pushing more people towards AI. Now, of course, the bottom line is, it's great whatever the big companies like OpenAI, Google talk about it. If companies are not adopting it, they are not going to get any revenue, right? The revenue that they make, of course, consumers have to adopt it, businesses have to adopt it. If that adoption doesn't happen, then AI will be unsuccessful. Not only does the adoption need to happen, it's just the adoption also has to result in tangible benefits to a company. The ROI has to be achieved. I think we are still far away from that ROI. So I think the overall impact of that, I would say, is still a question mark with respect to AI. Of course, there are early signs of how it improves productivity and makes it better in various areas. But I think the adoption is increasing. Again, this is a very latest chart from McKinsey, came out in March 2025. But the survey itself was done in June, July. And this again shows the folly of many of the companies, right? So we are still working in 2 time clocks. AI is racing ahead with a clock, which I don't think as humans we are really capable of handling. The old agentic push started somewhere around April, May last year. And then, of course, by June, July, when this survey was done, it was probably not big on the horizon of companies. Of course, now that's the only talk that people talk about, agentic AI. But nevertheless, you can see the hockey stick on the left-hand side. You see the overall adoption of AI and Gen AI. And on the right-hand side, again, McKinsey goes into, was it adopted by one function, more than 1, 2 functions, 3 functions, and so on. And you can see the curves there, right? So there are a few companies that have adopted it across the board in 5 or more functions. Quite a number of them are trying it out in one, right? So obviously there's a gap between what people are doing at different stages, different types of companies. So that's the AI adoption. So technology progress, then moving on to the investments, and then the adoption. Again, I could have gone on with the ROI. I don't think the ROI is there yet. There are just early indications as opposed to sort of sustainable ROI. And then there is also an impact on the workforce and the people that is still seeping through. We'll come back to that, but those are some of the key points that I wanted to make in this. Now I'm going to very quickly, as I said, it's going to be a different talk. So I'm going to, rather than present you with too many slides, I'm going to take you to the few documents that I've prepared, or a few of the LLMs, and we'll go through the same question with them. I'm going to just flash a few quotes, a few which are more on the hype side, a few which are more on the reality check side, right? So again, you can read this. This is Elon Musk, right? So again, quoting Gates, and Elon Musk also has a number of those quotes where talks about the agricultural productivity. Gates talked about that, right? So, and then Elon Musk sort of agreeing to that. And you can see another Bill Gates quote here. And this is a common theme in the Bay Area, West Coast. AI needs to go very fast because it is going to create this notion of abundance. And there is a whole group called effective accelerationism, which doesn't believe in any kind of a safeguard. They want they don't want any regulation. They want all the market forces to dictate. They want to go as fast as possible. And the thesis is it's going to create a land of abundance. So even if a few people are left out now, eventually it'll all come to wash, because there'll be so much available, so cheaply available, that will solve all the world's problems. Again, some of you might think, yeah, we have heard that before, right? So yeah, there is definitely that sense that this is world changing, climate change, poverty, disease, everything will be solved. Again, of course, because it's Bill Gates saying it, we probably have to at least put a slide here. Sam Altman is talking much more about the wealth it's going to create, maybe for a small group of people, right? So in this AI wave, right? So, and he believes a lot of people are getting richer than we have ever seen. That's probably true. But then there are economically, a lot of economists also looking at how broadly this technology is applicable, and where and how it'll accelerate, right? So generative AI is something that is a step function change, is what some people believe in. There's a more rigorous work around that. So again, we and a number of other universities are involved in. There's a very detailed labor statistics that the US Labor Organization uses, which has around 950 plus job categories. Each of those job categories has very specific skills that people use. And what people have done is taken that catalog and then looked at AI and said to what extent some of those tasks can be automated, decision-making or more routine tasks. And that also gives you a certain measure. And that's what people quote when they say 50% of all jobs are going to be automated, or 20% of the people believe that there's going to be 80% automation in many of the tasks, right? So those statistics essentially comes from work like this, which is sort of much more economically centered, but looking at the types of tasks. Little bit around the reality check here. So there's a lot of hype, and one of the key things here is to what extent people are just using it versus literally changing the way they work. And to basically change the way that I work, I need to trust the machine. So I call it trust management. So unless the human yes, you can always play around with some of these tools, but to what extent I'm really going to be using day to day depends on that trust. So the whole notion of trust management becomes important as to when people trust the machine. And also there's a reverse. When does the AI know which human to trust for what decision? So again, there's a lot of overpromise that people have been talking about, and AI is well known for that. Not just now, 1956, when AI was coined as a term and released, well-known researchers across all institutes basically said, oh, the problem of AI will be solved in 10 years. Now, 65, 67 years later, we are still talking about AI solving humanity's problems and poverty and so on that Bill Gates talked about. Every generation comes back and says, this time it's different. Yes, every time is different, but is this the time when we are actually going to get all of our problems solved? Again, question mark. So again, this is a couple of counters here. So you can see the two people here. Anthropic CEO, Anthropic is again a big large language model, says that in 3 to 6 months, 90% of all the coding will be done by AI. And there was a interesting reply to that by Zoho CEO Sridhar Vembu. Yeah, and he said, yes, I agree. 90% of what programmers write is boilerplate. And AI is doing a great job at eliminating that type of complexity. Yes, it is doing it, but it's eliminating some of the simple tasks. Now, of course, what the others on the AI side would say is, hey, that's great. So now you can have all of our people focus not on the 90% of the boring job. They can focus on the 10% of the place where they really add value. And that's going to be a common theme. I know everyone is talking about, hey, what happens to humans, and will we have jobs and so on. If as a human, you really need to have your place, then you need to move up the value chain. You need to be working on things that are truly value adding, not the ones that the AI can do. Maybe even if it's only 80% efficient or 90% as good as you really should be looking at what are the things that you can do that the AI cannot do, or what are the things that you can do with AI that no other human can do, right? So can you use the AI to do what you are doing much better? So the coders will be using the AI, but the ones who will really succeed are the ones who are not just doing what they call as monkey coding, but actually adding more value, right? So that's the way I think that's happening in every industry, but that's probably one that's important. Another great book, and two great authors, admire them, Arvind Narayanan and Sayesh Kapoor. Arvind Narayanan is sort of a well-known in the AI area, upcoming scientist, I think 10 years after his PhD now. He has written a book, and he's one of those persons who always calls to question on the rigor at how some of these things work. And it's a great book, AI Snake Oil, what AI can do, what it can't, and how to tell the difference. And he gives a number of examples in the book where under the cloak of proprietary patent pending and so on, companies tend to hide the real metrics on how good the AI is. And that's some of the reasons why we have some of the public benchmarks and public data sets so that we can verify what people are saying. As it gets beyond the general large language models, but goes into very specific industries in healthcare, financial services, it gets more difficult to have those benchmarks. And he gives a few examples in his book on how companies have basically taken other enterprises for a ride, saying this is great, this is all AI, when the performance is not that great, right? So again, that's the reason for the AI snake oil, right? So try to really look at, there's a lot of hype in his view, which I would tend to agree. And you need to be careful as to what is hype and what is real. Again, my own view here is, yes, there is a lot of good things, but beware of the hype, right? This is the way I would put it. Again, a few more reality checks. I know most consultants, including my firm, right? So all of those former firm consultants, all these analysts obviously look at all these leading areas, and I would say, I wouldn't say hype it up, but because of the way they write it, the way they look at the historical and where things are more moving, they generally tend to be much more bullish on the technologies. And it is interesting that Forrester is, again, putting a much more cautious note into some of those predictions, because there are lots of predictions on AI 2025, and they are basically calling it to be, hey, let's look at more what is the truth behind that, right? So and this particular thing is essentially claiming, even though people are talking about Gen AI, quite a bit of that is actually predictive AI. So my view is that really doesn't matter which AI. So it's not about predictive AI or generative AI. If the companies, through this hype, get to listen to what AI has to offer, it doesn't matter whether it's Gen AI or predictive AI. There's some very well-tested tools and well-predicted AI that you should be using if you're not already using. So that brings you with the other one. So I know we're on 8:30, so I'm going to go into the what I call as the 4 AI musketeers pass judgment on hyperreality. What I'm going to do is I'll just sort of flick through. This is the overall prompt. I'm going to go into at least a couple of these tools here. I won't go through it. I basically gave this prompt of the world of AI hyperreality, and I said, I'm going to give a 30-minute talk, and I want you to do deep research, right? So again, you can see the list here. Again, we'll make these slides available. I was fairly prescriptive in saying, identify 25 trends, look for hype, look for reality in each one of those, make a statement, say why it is hype, say why it is real, and then give me a verdict, right? So I don't want you to just get away by saying it's neither hype nor reality. Just give me a verdict, right? And then summarize it, is what I said. I tried it across these 4 large language models. So the first one is Perplexity Pro, Perplexity Pro. Again, very much a new upcoming company. It has DeepSeek underneath that. It uses it extensively. So I use that. OpenAI with its deep research, and Gemini, which is Google's, and Manus, which is, again, a Chinese company looking at agents, right? So that's what I've done. Now, these are some of the trends that the AI came up with, the top 5, right? So again, I'm not going to go into each one of them, but I'll see what the judgment it passed, right? So you can see here, it says the agentic AI is part hype, part reality. Multimodal is mostly real. AI regulation, mostly real, and so on, right? So enterprise AI adoption, real. AI environment impact, mostly real, right? So it's essentially giving you a verdict. And then we'll see in a minute, go in and see the documents that it has produced, right? So AI is mostly real with elements of hype is its final verdict. OpenAI, now you see that the trends are not identical. They are different in some way, but it captures many of the things that they talk about, right? So if you actually look at all 4, there is some overlap, but they are not exact. They are also distinct in their own way. So this one actually picked up AI infrastructure and compute. The other one did not. It also looked at global AI arms race, which the other one didn't capture as a trend. The others are somewhat similar, right? So regulation and enterprise adoption and so on, the wording is different. Again, real, right? So that's how OpenAI has categorized it. So, but the first one alone, it says, but with a healthy dose of hype in the short term, right? So it sort of recognizes that there is a hype in the generative AI going mainstream. That's OpenAI for you. AI is real is the final verdict. Google AI. Again, very similar. Everyone is picking the regulation, the generative AI proliferation, workforce implication, right? So, but they don't pick up a few things that OpenAI picked up and so on. Again, you see significant reality with overlapping hype, right? So primarily real, strongly real, right? So with some caveats, right? So again, you get a sense of what Google AI is doing, and then you get a sense of Manus AI, which interestingly puts some metric to it, right? So instead of trying to score it, AI strategy as a competitive differentiator, reasoning abilities, augmenting, again, picks up some of those that the others picked, but again, these are all very distinct, as you can see. Again, it comes up with a verdict. Now, this is the interesting piece, and then we can look at the models now. Perplexity took 83 steps. I'll show that in a minute. I'll start with Perplexity. For the question that I gave, it had 83 sub-steps in which it started reasoning. It looked at 50 different sources to synthesize that information. Of course, I just presented in one slide as 5 bullet points, but I'll show you the full breadth of what it's doing. OpenAI, 27 different sources, and it took 8 minutes to actually compute. Google was the fastest. In 27 seconds, it computed. Manus, again, took a long time. I was not really clocking it. Some of them don't give all the steps. You can see it happening, whereas Perplexity just captures the steps, and that Manus had around 30 documents. So I'm going to go into those systems here. So let me stop sharing. So this, and then let's get back to, I'm going to show maybe just a couple of them. So this is Perplexity Pro, and I won't explain the tool as such. I created a space called Guest Talks, and then within Guest Talks, you can see my prompt here. So you can see I've just written, I'm giving a talk in the world of hyper AI, the second Curious for a webinar, and then I want you to do all of those things. Now you can see that it has taken 83 steps. Now I can go look here. Now it's giving you an explanation of what it did. So it says to you, I will now search the web for articles and reports on 2024 AI trends, 2025 AI trends. I'd asked it to identify 25 key trends articulated by experts. I wanted it to pull out quotes, right? So, and it does that. And then you can see the different articles that it has picked up, right? So it picked up something from MIT Technology Review, a PwC article, LinkedIn articles. It's going all over the place, right? So McKinsey, Gartner, Microsoft. And then it said, I found several articles which talks about trends. So it's basically going into the web and then getting anyone who has written anything about AI trends 2024, AI trends 2025, state of AI, right? So all of those reports it's gotten. Not only has it gotten that, but then it is actually reading it. It is understanding it and saying, okay, multimodal is a trend that more than 3 reports talked about, right? So autonomous systems is and then it's essentially compiling that broader list of 25 trends. And then it's picking the codes. Because I asked it to pick the codes, it's picking those codes and then putting it there. And then it says, again, I won't go through the 84 steps here, but you can see that it's going step by step, right? So what are the trends? And what are the trends comprising the business, technical, and policy perspective is what I wanted, right? So how does it progress technically, what the business is doing, and what impact it has on society, what policies there are, right? So it's actually going and researching all of those things. And then it goes into each one of the trends and can dig deeper, right? So it's going into agentic AI and then saying what people have read about agentic AI. It's capturing, so now it's coming after codes, right? So you can see Gary Marcus, one of the leading AI folks, is saying you can't build agents unless you have common sense, sound reasoning, a tight grounding in reality, and systems that reliably do what you ask them to do, right? So all these codes it's pulling up from, right? So you can see trend 2, what are the different multimodal AI, what are the different codes? So for each of those trends, it went to 25, it went to all the sources, identified the 25. From the 25, it decided that 5 are main, right? So it used some criteria of popularity, different mentions, and so on. And then it's doing a deeper dive on those 5 and essentially giving you things that I asked for. It's giving me the codes, and you can see it is giving me business value, industry adoption, market growth. And interestingly, for each one, it is actually giving you the source document, right? So if you go here, it says 7 rapid AI trends happening in 2024. So you can click on that, and that'll be an article, somewhere on the web, right? So this company, again, I wouldn't have got it, but it says 7 rapid AI trends happening in 2024. So you get to the sources. I know people often talk about, AI just gives these sources, makes up these sources. It can still make up sources, right? So, but here you're essentially seeing the power of it, right? So it just goes on. So it is given each step, and then it is writing the full report. Now, what I also did, so this is the report, this is the summary of the report. You can see the 25 key trends, and then it is taking the top 5 AI trends. That's what I put in my slide. Obviously, this is a whole report here, and it's giving substantiating facts here. right? So, and interestingly, it can take both perspectives. It's taking the hype perspective and then showing, hey, what are some of the quotes that people have talked about? And there's a very interesting quote here. I'll just read it out. If your AI model has a 1% error rate and you plan over 5,000 steps, that 1% compounds like compound interest, eventually making results effectively random, right? So this is a great quote by Demis Hassabis, right? So DeepMind leader and now part of Google AI. So even though there's only 1% error, that can magnify. So be careful on what these AI systems are doing, right? So that's the hype perspective. And then, of course, the reality perspective and then the final verdict, right? So again, I won't go into the details. What I also did was then ask it the final verdict. You can see the final verdict. And then it's giving a few references. So these are a short list of the 50 references or 60 references, I think 50 references sources here. You can click on that and then it'll show you all the sources there.
Anand, I have a question.
Sure.
While you were looking at all of this, how did you discern that the responses that you got were not made up? What kind of a test and a filter did you add to make sure that whatever you saw was authentic and real?
Yes, a good question. So this is where you need a little bit of that background knowledge to know what it is saying, right? So again, this is an area which obviously I know about. So I know what the key trends are, and all the top 5 trends, whether I agree that they are really the top 5, I can't agree on all of them, right? So because there is some overlap, but I would agree that they're probably all part of the top 10 trends if you aggregate it. So you need to have a little bit of that knowledge. So that's number one, to see where it's going. Number two, this is where I think the sources come in, right? So you really need to have the sources, and I need to go and read it, just as I was showing here, right? So if I go to any of these sources, I want to go and see what that person said. So even though it takes now, right, so 2025 AI business predictions, this is PwC's article, right? So I want to, if not read it fully, at least glance through, look at the summary and see whether it's making the right decision. So that's where the sources help. Now, the third confirmation, again, this may be groupthink, right? So again, we can come back to how do you discern between a groupthink and something unique. Now, there are multiple of these systems all getting equally, some more than others, powerful, that you actually feed it into multiple and see what the results are, right? So that way you're trying to distill some of the unique features. You're also trying to distill what is common amongst them. That also gives you a little bit of confidence. But great question. So you need to trust the system. And the only way you trust it is by the repeated usage, right? So even now, Perplexity has been one of the better ones in actually giving you the sources, and sometimes it just pulls out of the thin air references. So always, as I said, always go and check, at least glance through or read through what it's saying and then distill. Typically, if you find the source, I know the way the LLMs work, it will get the gist of what is there, right? So that I think it's reasonably good at. How do you know that? That's based on some of the benchmark tests, right? So a number of these tests actually look for very specific activities. They look at the full paper and say, can you summarize it? And even in that summarization, sometimes there are 2 types of summaries. One is just capturing sentences from across the entire document to put together a coherent paragraph, right? So that's one type of summary, which just summarizes. There's another type of summary which goes into what is the insight behind this paper, that they are less good at, but there are metrics to how do you measure that, right? So there are various things in summarization that people look at. And then there is a third type of summarization. I may be looking at a paper, but I might be interested only in 2 pages of that, which is very specific to my research. Even though the author might have done many things, I'm looking for almost a needle in a haystack, right? So how do I get a better estimation of that? So again, there are tests to do that. So I would say 3 levels of verification that you need to do, right? So one is the benchmarking at the lowest level, and then just checking the sources, and then at the other level, some level of background knowledge are the ones that you need.
Great. Thanks, Anand.
And
Sorry, I interrupted your
yeah,
flow.
no. I think I'm almost finished. I know we are at 45, right? So
But don't be too worried about the time. It's
yeah.
flowing well. So let's just make it conversation.
So,
Yeah.
and one of the things which I know a lot of people here would be interested in is I didn't want to just stop with what is AI doing, right? So then I know that many people have this question. I have this question, and wherever I go, I talk about this. I gave the next prompt. Given the above conclusions, how should we prepare for it? People who are above 40, 50 years old, and what it means for their careers. People who are more in the mid-career, 30 to 45, what does that mean, right? So people studying now for a college education, 20 to 30, how would you advise them? How do you advise your kids or grandkids, right? So these are all questions invariably get asked, right? So again, I said, hey, go find the answers for this. But then if you look at the next prompt there, analyze what people recommend on how these various groups look at their careers, learn, and prepare for the future. Give me pragmatic and actionable ideas for each of these groups in a clear report with case studies and examples, right? So that's what it's doing now. Again, it has come up with the actionable list here, and it is giving you examples, right? So again, it's given examples. Sometimes it can make it up. So I would just go there, right? So I haven't checked everything, but you can go there and see whether it's for real and read that, right? So this happens to be read. Most of these are real, but it can make mistakes, as I said. AI and workforce transformation, new skills for manufacturing jobs. So someone has written an article there, right? So you can go read it. Now, what it's doing, so again, it's doing very specific things, as I asked. Reinventing experience in the AI era. How do you do that? One of the things that it's suggesting is be a reverse knowledge monetization, right? So capturing the expertise of people who are quote unquote retiring. Now, you're not really generating the next generation of human experts, but can you transfer that knowledge to the AI, right? So this is a common thing in many industries. So I know in the insurance industry, actuaries and underwriters are more in their 50 plus, right? So very few people are getting into that area. So now AI is doing more and more of that. So how do you do this reverse knowledge monetization, right? So, hey, I'm an expert. I have 30 years experience, I'll help you train your model. Phased upskilling pathways, right? So strategic advisory roles, blah, 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 right? Again, you might look at this and say, yeah, this looks good, doesn't look, but at least someone has just given you all of these things with some examples, which probably would have taken you at least a couple of hours of search, right? So again, goes into mid-career professionals and so on, right? So, and it all produces some nice reports. And I've done this across the different platforms that I mentioned for interesting variations. So some are good, some are fast. Google AI was the fastest. And because I said presentation, it did not produce a report. It directly went into a slide format. And it said, hey, for a 30-minute talk, you need whatever, 10, 12 slides. And here are the slides and the content for the slides, right? So they're still not very good at writing PowerPoint presentations, right? So, but I think it's sort of very close. They still write it, but it's not formatted and it's not the way it's sort of presentable, but that's just a matter of a few more months before you do before you get to that, right? So still AI is not very good at actually doing diagrams. There are a few tools that are emerging, but again, it's a matter of time before these things get sorted. So these things I put it into things which are more engineering than a scientific breakthrough, right? So, and engineering-wise, people will solve those issues. There's enough money going in that I would say they would get solved. So that's pretty much what I wanted to share. So we'll make these things available. I can, if you want, I'll just share the. So I've got basically 4+4, 8 different documents here. And I think Shushma, through the platform, will make it available. So this
Yes.
one is a doc from OpenAI. So again, OpenAI is actually giving you all of those inline, so you can look at it. Yeah, there's a custom silicon AI hardware boom. And then you can say, hey, what the hell is that? Then you can just click on it, and hopefully it takes you to a paper, right, that you can read. So there's a wealth of information. There's probably around each document has 70, 80 references. And just imagine that all this was done literally. I had the prompt and then just went to 4 windows and just initiated the prompt, went and had a coffee, and all of this was there, right? So, and then I thought, hey, no, I need to go beyond and then just look for implications, and that was done, right? So all literally within, I would say within an hour, I had all 4 of them giving me these reports. Now my task then becomes, yeah, now I need to read this, understand it, and synthesize it the way I want to do it and my spin on it, right? So that becomes the human task. Now, going and doing what I would call a monkey job in Google search, and then trying to identify the reports, dump it somewhere, read those reports, synthesize it, right? So now that has changed. Not that I don't want to read the papers, I will still read the papers, but I'm not, obviously, I did not read the 80 times 4, right? So 300 plus papers, right? So I looked selectively at some of the trends, looked at the papers, right? So yeah, no, I know that it makes sense. But if you're getting into the area, then obviously you can read a selected number. You can even ask the AI which are the most important ones to read. So there's another one called Notebook LM from Google, which is being integrated. You can dump 50 papers and say, hey, given what I want, which papers should I read? Not only which paper should I read, which sections of that paper should I read also, you can ask, right? And then it'll give you that. So you're still reading, but you're reading in a more targeted way. And I see myself changing the way I read and research. It's not so much around, there are 10 papers here, I need to read each paper from the first word to the last word. It's more around, hey, there is 100 papers here, which are the really good ones for the job I want. I'm not saying that the other papers are not good, but I have a purpose in mind. I have a goal in mind for that. What do I need to understand? Then I'm really asking the ChatGPT or Notebook LM, tell me more, right? So what happens here? What did this author talk about? And then it goes, searches it, and then gives you. By that process, I decide which authors and which papers I go and need to read. And then I do go and read, but then it's only 3 or 4 papers that has been distilled by the AI. And then I go and read that page to page, right? Or word to word, right? So now I'm still reading those papers, but instead of just picking 4 at random, and obviously I can't read all 100 abstracts to then decide the 4. Now AI is helping me which 4 to read for the purpose that I want, right? So for a different purpose, it might pick up anything. So that's the way it's sort of changing. So let me stop here. We'll make these things available. It's a good exercise on the power of the AI, right? So again, you were not able to do this literally 3 months back. You wouldn't have been able to do it, right? So I would have had to add multiple queries, and for each one, maybe get the documents and then have it digest and do it. I could still do it in a few steps, but it would probably take me 2 hours to produce that report. Here, it was just one prompt and the whole report is there, right? So, and across not just one platform, it's multiple platforms. That's why I think at the start I mentioned, it's no longer a 1 or 2 horse race. There's sort of at least a 4 or 5, half a dozen different horses, all going more neck to neck, right? So you find one better, and then it's just a matter of a couple of weeks, even couple of days, couple of weeks before the other one overtakes in one element of it. It is not fully there, but I think everyone copies the others, and everyone has their own unique way of doing things, that the system is moving really, really fast. So with that, let me stop sharing and then open it up to you. So people can.
So I'm going to get into we're going to get into a very interactive session here. But before we do that, I wanted to just um, highlight a few things. So number one, at Second Careers, we are truly committed to bringing transformative trends, and be it technology or otherwise, okay, into how we run our platform. And we are truly committed to educating everyone in our community because these are transformative. Now, people could, I don't think we can be oblivious of the AI trend. Now, the way each one of us would use AI could vary dramatically. Some of us could use it just for improving our home lives, okay? now potentially think about this. Okay, as you get older, is there a possibility to have robotic AIs as your companions? Okay, so the extent to which something like AI can impact you is just vast, and we are just scratching the surface. And but it's also evolving at a breakneck speed. So I want to underscore that we are committed through our community, through our learning, to do two things. Number one, increase your awareness, and number two, increase your expertise, because we think knowing something like AI and applying it to what you have been an expert in. Many of you may have been financial experts. You might have been C-level executives. Now, do you need to have an appreciation of AI in order for you to further your career well into your 60s and your 70s? Okay. And that is the lens with which Second Careers is integrating AI in its platform and also spreading awareness. So there will be many more sessions of this kind, and I'm very happy to tell you that Dr. Rao is on our advisory board. We haven't made the announcement yet, so you are the first group of people who know it. So welcome on our board, Anand. We are delighted to have you. So we've looked at a lot of questions. We have more than 20 questions. Some of you had shared your questions even beforehand. And the questions fall into three buckets. One is very tool specific, okay? In terms of what are the other tools, for instance, there's a question from Sabrina on, Sabrina happens to be one of our leaders at Second Careers, as to Claude and why you did or didn't mention Claude, and did you have the various AI engines cross-check each other? Why don't we start with that, Anand?
Yes. Yeah. No, I did not use Claude because Manus actually uses Claude behind the scenes. So that's why I didn't bring in Anthropic, right? So I use Anthropic a lot. At least so far, I've found Anthropic and Claude Sonnet very good for code. So typically I go to Claude for code, and then I've been using both OpenAI and Perplexity for text. Now, the interesting thing is the which one I use for what keeps changing. So initially, I used to go only to Perplexity for references, for sources. They've always were better. But then, of course, OpenAI came up with the sources. Now, Perplexity also came up with better overall understanding with the reasoning component from DeepSeek. So to your question around which one to use, I've come to the view now that you really need to be on OpenAI, Anthropic, and Google, right? So Microsoft so far has been more or less, I think, reselling some of the others, but of course, fee is good as well. I think that's their own model. So maybe Microsoft, but definitely these three. And then whatever else that comes up from outside, right? Especially DeepSeek and Manus, both are Chinese companies. Don't want to get into the geopolitics of things, but people are still very worried. Should I use it? Should I not use it? What are the security risks and so on? So I tend to operate most of the time with the US ones, but I do look at the others as well, just to see where and how they are doing. But to your point around Anthropic, yeah, definitely, I would consider them as one of the things that you need to experiment with. And different things are very good at different areas. Again, we talked a little bit about image at the start. There are some models which are very good for image, right? So Midjourney and so on, based on stable diffusion, and sort of Midjourney was very good. Now, in fact, OpenAI is very good at as well, right? So, and Google has been typically very good at multimodal. That's again, typically the others copy, right? So again, you need to be on all of those platforms. I did not cross-verify, just I just left it to each one. Now, there is an interesting thing that happens when you start cross-verifying, and you generally tend to get to sort of a common mean, right? So everything starts looking very similar. So that's why I left each one of them independent. So for example, Manus might take what I fed from OpenAI, incorporate that into its own list. And similarly, the reverse, right? So, and that might happen. And you might actually get to a convergence, or maybe I haven't tried it. Maybe some of them are unique, but you can try that. The other key technique that you can use, even if you're just using one LLM, whenever you get an answer with a large language model, just don't stop with the first answer. Just use the simple prompt always. Whenever you get an answer and you want to use it, just say critique, suggest changes, and revise. Right? So just those three: critique, suggest changes, revise on the one that is whatever is there above. Now, what it does for the large language model, the way it is built, as soon as you say critique, it is taking on a different role, right? So when it is writing something, it takes on a role. When it is critiquing, it takes a different role. And then it is identifying all the things in which it could be made better. And then you're also saying, suggest the changes. So it is articulating those changes. It's not just seeing it, it is actually writing down. So as it's generating the sentences, its attention focuses on all the changes. Now, you're basically given it a list of things to do, and then you go and say revise, right? So now it knows exactly what to do because you just asked it to articulate that. So there's just these three prompts makes the answer that you're getting so much better, right? So you'll actually look at it and say, why didn't I think about it? In some cases, you do think about it. Oh, no, that's not right. You need to fix it. But now the system itself is coming. It's called self-reflection, right? So there's a design pattern called self-reflection. You're actually asking the large language model, hey, self-reflect. It's like what you and I do if you're writing, right? So you write the first piece, more as a stream of thought. You just write down everything on paper, right? So anyone who is writing blogs and so on, then you step back and say, okay, now let me read it. And it doesn't make sense. And this sentence is not connected with this paragraph. Now I can write it differently. You come up with the suggestion. So that's exactly what the LLM is doing now with that prompt. Now, there's an interesting experiment I've tried. If you actually try doing this reflection multiple times, you'll notice something very interesting. The final output has deviated quite a lot from where you started with, right? So the LLM is almost telling you what you should have written or what it thinks is the right thing, which somehow I don't like, right? So I want my voice, right? So if I do too many corrections, suddenly I notice that between the first version where I had the real question and the output here, it seems to be reasonably different. That no, that's not exactly what I want. And that's one of the reasons why I didn't do this cross verification. I think you can do it once or twice. If you do it too many times, there is a convergence and it is the same information that everything is spitting out because you have changed the context and everything looks very similar.
Interesting. So there were three buckets of questions. One was very tool specific, and there are a few more questions of that ilk. The second is very personal. What should I be doing? What should I be doing as an individual? And the third is the consummate. What is the future? What is the judgment? AI for good, AI for bad. So these would be the three buckets. Shanti, do you, Shanti? Shanti, are you there?
Yes.
Shanti, can you populate some of the questions that have been on the chat?
Yes.
Yeah.
I know, I think there's a raised hand by Sundaram.
Yes, Sundaram.
Yeah, we can probably answer Sundaram while you find that.
Yeah.
Please go ahead.
Thank you. Thank you, Anand. You're able to hear me?
Yes, yeah, we can hear you. Yeah.
Okay, great. I think at the outset, thanks to Sushma and Second Careers, I think it was a very, very insightful session. Thank you, Anand, for sparing the time. So the way I think clearly productivity is a key theme that is going to emerge as the benefits of AI. And on a lighter note, I can see PhD students leveraging on something that you were
Mhm.
talking about today. And I was just looking at an analogy, like just like doctors from Edinburgh put the suffix to their qualification, we might have a situation where people, PhD students will say, enabled by OpenAI or something like that. I
Yep.
think a lot of routine work is getting
Mhm.
clearly productivized. My question to you is, in terms of for it to gain acceptance, I think like in any field, there will be low hanging fruits where people can see the authenticity of AI-enabled solutions. To me, I think in the medical diagnostics field, there
Mhm.
could be a lot of changes where accurate prediction and diagnosis, which is the artifact of talented doctors, be it
Mhm.
in any country, developed or otherwise. We see a lot of examples where the diagnosis was wrong or more accurate,
Mhm.
right? So that I thought is going to be one area, just as AI is going to be. So I just wanted to have your
Yeah.
views, and more importantly, I was wanting to also understand how these areas can make societal changes, right? Be it microfinance, access to finance, access to healthcare, right? So technology is obviously making things a lot more cheaper. The ride hailing apps are a classic example. We are paying less than what we paid for a cab, let's say in developing countries like even India
Yep.
15 years back, despite the cost of fuel going up, because technology has brought together a lot of talented drivers who are getting finance to buy their own cars and then run on the Uber app or Ola app or whatever. Similarly, how do you see medical diagnostics, microfinance?
Mhm.
Those could be very low-hanging fruits for the overall societal benefit. So I just thought I will ask you about your views on the same. Thank you so
Yeah.
much again. Yeah.
Thank you, Sundaram. Yeah.
Yeah, no, great question. So I'll just do the medical and then talk about the more societal one. On the medical, you're absolutely right? So there is so much that these kinds of systems, ChatGPT and the like, can provide to the users. Now, definitely in US, maybe in India as well, when I talk to some of my friends and relatives, patients are using ChatGPT quite extensively. In fact, there are lots of even lobby groups and groups that are being formed in US, which are patients who use generative AI or patients who use ChatGPT, vocally getting people to go understand what is happening to them before they actually go to the physician or doctor. Now, sometimes there is a danger that they not only consult the thing to just get their knowledge, but even start following the advice. So there's a gap between doing research to understand to following advice. And then I worry about the consequences of that advice, right? So now, yes, gaining an information, all for it. This is what the consumers are doing. On the other side, when I look at the medical professionals, we work quite a few here. The medical professionals are very loath to use some of this new technology, especially generated. Not so much the X-ray diagnostics and so on, right? So pathology, X-ray diagnostics, that's sort of being automated with tools and people using those. But typical doctors, clinicians hesitate to use some of these tools because they feel that it's not giving the right answer and so on, right? So on the one hand, you have one group that says no to some of this technology, and the other side, the patients are using it, and there is a risk to the patients using it, right? So people are actually feeding in their lab reports and saying, hey, what should I do? What does this value mean? Is it good? Is it bad? What should I do, right? So it gives some advice. Of course, it'll say that it is not medical advice, right? So you need to consult your physician. But if it's going to take me 6 weeks to go and see my physician, I'm not going to be bothered, right? So I'll just take the advice. So that's where there's a gap between what the patient wants to do and finds the value versus what the system is looking. That's why I think enterprises are still very slow to adapting these things. And as consumers, you want to adopt these things, right? So that's why there's a gap there. And then that gap needs to be closed. Some of the work that I'm doing in a research perspective is, can you create something in the center which marries the language between a consumer or a patient or a caregiver and the physician or the clinician, right? So again, I want it in plain English. Don't tell me all those sort of values and I don't understand what potassium level or calcium level or what B1C, B2C, all of those things mean. Just tell me in plain English what I should do, should not do, which again, you need, in some cases, you need a multiple group of doctors to be actually able to tell you. And that's where the ChatGPTs come on their own, because they're much more holistic, interestingly, than people, which again is counterintuitive because of the way our system has worked is very siloed. And these systems are now coming from the side and then taking a much larger picture and providing that information and advice, right? So interestingly, if you go to GPT Store, there are a huge number of advice giving machines, whether it's financial advice or whether it is health advice. So if you have eye problem, there is an eye doctor, there is a skin doctor, right? It's all within GPT. So you can just go and say, hey, you can even upload the image, right? So actually I had a sty, I uploaded the image in that and then said, hey, what is this? And it's actually giving me over-the-counter drugs. And I literally took that. Of course, I had my brother-in-law who was a doctor. He said, no, that's right. Yeah, you can go ahead and do it, right? So at least I had that verification from him. But that's what people are doing. So that gap is there. Now, in what I said is also the answer for what's happening societally, what AI is doing. And I think the fundamental thing that the AI is doing in the examples that you mentioned, right? So like Uber, like microfinance, like the healthcare, it's literally flattening the chain, right? So the supply chain. Now, typically the way we have become such an industrialized society over the past 200, 300 years, right? So from a very agrarian society to where we are today is because of this notion of an organization. Take the problem, break it down into smaller and smaller pieces to get our people to do that, and then chain all of them together, right? So that's how today's organizations work, right? So take healthcare, right? So yeah, there's a patient and there's a nurse and then there's a doctor and then there's a specializations of doctors, right? So, and then you go from one to the other. Or take Uber, for example, right? So there's an organization, right? So before Uber, it is taxis, right? So every city had a taxi, right? So you'll go from step to step, or manufacturing. Now what AI is doing is essentially saying, hey, all these middle people, if they're just pushing numbers, pushing money back and forth, they may or may not be that useful, right? So just connect the pieces. So now I'm able to go, I may not be the world's best researcher on cancer, but if someone near dear to me has a specific condition, I can go and get pretty much very detailed information if I'm prepared to read and go through that on that specific cancer, then maybe even better than my GP. Maybe not better than my oncologist, specialist oncologist, maybe not, because they have that experience. But in terms of knowledge, I can go and get that knowledge if I'm prepared to, right? So that's the kind of a disintermediation of intelligence, of knowledge. I would say more knowledge that is happening now. The judgment, so I usually, sorry for the long answer, there are two things that I see AI doing or people having. One is expertise. The second one is experience. The way we get expertise is through studying, right? So we go through whatever, 18 years of schooling, and then roughly 4 to 10 years, right? So maybe medical field, maybe a little bit more, right? So 15 years of studying for knowledge. Yes, we pick up various skills during that process, but we spend that. That to me is expertise. Now, what the AI has done, large language models have done is, hey, instead of spending whatever 22 years, 25 years learning that expertise, I've essentially got 1 trillion documents which I've digested. Not only I've got the trillion old documents, any new document that comes, I can digest that and then give you that expertise, right? So that expertise problem, it is actually to a large extent is solving or solved, right? So we're already seeing the hit from that expertise being automated for us or given to us. What we still have or holding on to is the experience. Over the past, whatever, 30, 35, 40 years in my working career, I've experience. I've seen, met, discussed, doing so many things, and that's harder to pin down, right? So I've got some experience. So that comes in the form of judgment that I have, which maybe a 25-year-old may not have, right? So that judgment or that experience is not yet captured by the AI, but we are in the process of capturing it, right? So, and one of the suggestions said, hey, transfer your experience or the expertise to the AI. AIs can also do judgment. It's not that AI can't do the judgment, but where does it get the judgment from? It needs to get the judgment from the people. And we need to find the right people with the right judgment to pass it on. This also addresses the good versus the bad. If your judgment has been in an adversarial or in a bad way, and that's what the AI gets coded, right? So yes, the AI can be bad AI. At the same time, if the judgment is good and you're feeding that, it can be good AI, right? So the AI is neutral, but the way people are training it could make it a good AI or it could be a bad AI, right? So again, we are going to have a proliferation of these. So it's not that there's going to be one AI which is going to rule us all. There are 9 billion people or 8 billion people. We are probably going to have 16 billion agents and AI, each one with its own view, right? So again, long answer. Sorry for that.
No, thank you.
I think
For a moment,
Shanti-
actually, yeah. For a moment, it was comforting to hear that experience can be a differentiator, but only for a moment. After that, you quickly jumped in with your statistics. But I have a couple of questions where people are a little concerned about AI, and I'm going to raise one from Nancy, who says, how do we control the use of AI by students in their assignments? And I want to add to her question and ask you, can we actually control AI in assignments, and should we control it? What's your perspective?
Yeah, no, good question. So again, being in educational institutions here at CMU, that's a very hot topic for the past couple of years. I have a view, and then of course, as an institution, we have formalized some of these things. So there is a set of subjects that people teach or universities teach, where it is important to get some of the foundational, fundamental knowledge, right? So there, again, one is, how do students gain that knowledge? Then the second aspect is, how do you actually test them for that knowledge, right? So again, I would say the way students gain that knowledge should be completely democratized. In other words, they should be able to use any of these language models and tools, right? So to learn better, right? So, and now the question is, they might just take an assignment and feed it in. And again, as you just saw, you can produce very good ones, even much better than someone of your peers who has actually done it all from scratch. You could produce a better one using DeepSeek, potentially, right? So if that's the case, am I really testing the student, and am I giving the grade to the right student comes in? So I want to separate the two. So in terms of the knowledge gaining, knowledge assimilation, I think the students must be allowed to use everything so that they can really learn. And I see these LLMs as a great learning tool, right? So I tell many of our students here, master's, PhD students, you need to know how to learn with these systems. Don't just give the answer and then give it. Try and probe further, right? So what I mean by that, let's say there are 16 metrics that can be derived from 4 numbers, which is called the confusion matrix, right? So true positive, true negative, false positive, false negatives. So there's just 4 numbers there, but there are 16 metrics. Each one of those 16 metrics is very valid for a certain type of situation. Now, in class, I cannot fully go into all of the details. It'll probably take 2 lectures for me to actually do it. So what I do with the students is, hey, these are the 16 ones, but go play around with when to use what, right? So in CMU, we have got something called Socratic Notebook. And what the Socratic Notebook actually does, it's a learning tool. It's a personalized learning tool, but with the instructor mediation, if you like. So for every lecture that I do in the class, there is a chapter, if you like, in this interactive book where the student can go in. So I look at a particular subject, and when I'm giving the lecture, I pitch it to the middle of the audience. Let's say there are 30 students. I look at what is an average so that they can get it. Now, some students may want to go deeper into some of those concepts. Some students may want to go at a higher level, trying to understand some of the basics. So I have literally 20, 25 papers attached to that lecture at different levels in this Socratic notebook. And I actually have guiding questions and learning objectives and so on. So the student comes to the class, hears me, but then they can go back and explore, right? So as I said, there are 16 different metrics. They can go and say, hey, when do I apply this? And then the LLM, I've actually given which papers to refer to, and it can pull out from that and do. So that way, the learning gets better. And students say, hey, how do I apply that in the business world? How do I apply it in healthcare? How do I apply it in retail? Then it comes up with the different examples. So your learning becomes much better now. And not only your learning, but I actually have tests there, right? So Socratic notebook would again cover for the depth as well as the breadth of the topic, right? So ask multiple choice questions. It creates the multiple choice questions and you answer it. It gives the answer. It gives the rationale. Now that's for the learning. Now, how do you test it, right? So that's why what I've tended to do is I've allowed students to actually go and use generative AI, but they are meant to essentially provide the entire interaction, or just nowadays you can share the link of what you did. And I would go there and see how the students have used it. So I have pretty open-ended questions. So any of these generative tools can be used, but I can see the difference in how people have used it. And that's part of the teaching that I want to do to the students is you need to know how to ask the questions, what questions to ask. In other words, the other way of putting it is, now you need to be good at not knowing the answer. You need to be good at asking the right question. The answer is all there out there, right? So, but what is the relevant question for the problem that I'm trying to address? So if you know how to ask the right question, know what the right question is, and know how to ask the right question in these ChatGPTs and the like, then I think you are a better learner. Having said that, some instructors, some courses, they still want the students to learn fundamentally and know the equations, know the applications of it. And interestingly, what we have done is some courses have actually, I would say, reverted back to having written exams, having closed book, no laptop or laptop lockdown browser kind of exams, where actually people are being forced to not use anything else, right? So, and I know a couple of people have actually asked the students to do the exercise, but then they have to do a mini 5-minute interview with the professor,
Yes.
just asking them very pertinent questions to see, hey, have they just copied it? Did they really understand? If they understood by reading Gen AI, I'm all for it. But if they didn't understand, they're just sort of repeating it, then that's bad, right? So again, long answer to that question.
No, but I think the implications of this is actually vast. It's not just in terms of students taking exams, but it also sort of reiterates when companies are interviewing people. There was a time when we said, hey, we need to do aptitude tests, right?
Yep.
But here there could be a screening done by AI, but then eventually
Yep.
the human interface becomes absolutely important.
Yep.
That's what I am sort of taking from what you're saying, Professor.
And I also raise the bar. Now I'm
Right.
assuming that they have access to all of this, right? So for my class on agent-based modeling and agentic technology, I told the students, hey, you're supposed to create a game, right? So in 7 weeks, you're supposed to create a game of the impact of AI on the workforce. And you need to create half a dozen worker agents and company agents, and workers, they save time and they decide whether that money should be given back to the shareholders or reinvested in training, all the kinds of things that we would discuss here. Instead of just writing an essay, I told, go and create a game. And here are all the tools that you can use to create the game. Create the game and then do the analysis. Now, of course, they can use all the tools, but that's something that would have taken probably a 6 months full-time work before you can think through and generate a game and write the code and debug and so on. But these students had to do it in 7 weeks, literally by the time they get settled, it's probably 2 weeks. Literally in 5 weeks, they had to do it, right? So that raises the bar on their use and the capability of the tool. So now you are developing these assignments, just sort of stretching it further. Given that you have these AI, you should be producing something far better. And I don't expect a nice Word document report on all of these things, right? So I'm expecting tools, right? So you're raising the bar for the students.
Right. I'm going to call out to people to open their unmute themselves and ask. And here's the order in which we would go. Rajiv Datar, are you there? Rajiv, can you
Yeah, I'm here.
unmute yourself and ask your question?
Hi, Sushma.
Yeah.
Hi, Anand.
Keep it pithy because we have
We're
less
running out
than
of time.
5 minutes.
Yes,
Yeah.
I know. Anand, quick question. I think it was very early on. And it's believed that the ChatGPT, when it came on scene, when LLMs came on scene, they had a vast amount of resource material, all public. It's been scrubbed to bits right now. The question is, are they running up to a situation where they're going to run out of material from which to make the suggestions? One. And a follow-up question to that is, what happens when you hit that plateau, when there's no more source material to come from, because the new material that's coming in is going to be much, much smaller in terms of rate than what it banked on. So what happens at that point? Do you get a synthetic AI, and then what happens to hyper reality?
Yeah, it's a good questions, right? So two answers to this. Sort of one is, I think we have this view that, hey, these are all human generated. Maybe 2020, 2021 before was human generated, and then after that it gets a little bit murky, right? So now people have this view that there is AI generated content, there is human generated content. I think that that division is very quickly disappearing, right? So when someone writes it, they are using so much of AI, they might actually write the sentences, but it is so much driven by the AI. And in some cases, the AI might actually be writing some or all of it, right? So is grammar correction using AI or not using AI? If you are writing a piece of article, but then you were getting human editors to edit for English and better structure. Now that's what Grammarly is doing for you. Now you're using a human editor. Is it okay to use a human editor without authorship? But now you're using AI for that same purpose. So I think this line is just sort of very closely disappearing. So the AI is helping the humans, and the human are writing some, the AI is writing some, it's all becoming mixed. So to the first question, it's not as if there is a pile of human-generated data and suddenly that's going to disappear and everything is going to be AI. Now we are in the realm of combined AI and human written stuff, right? So in that sense, my notion there is we are going to have far more of that now that the AI is also helping us to write, right? So people are writing, many of the blogs now are partly written by the AI or partly sourced for ideas and what to write by the AI, but maybe written by the human, right? So there's so much more content that's going to be generated. So that's one. The second answer is more, AI is going beyond just going and taking something, right? So there's a whole thing around AI research scientist, where AI is getting into fundamentally how do people do research. I'm not talking just about writing articles from looking at a pile of research documents. It's how do I conduct fundamental biotech research, for example, right? So how do you form experiments? What are good experiments? And how do you hypothesize? So there are agents, AI agents that are actually starting to do that. So there it comes to, just as we come up with original ideas, AI is also coming up with original ideas. So synthetic doesn't necessarily mean mimicked or copied. Synthetic can also be original, right? So we are getting into the area of synthetic copied to synthetic original as you get more into these types of AI, which is actually generating new insights as opposed to just copying, right? So, and I'm reminded of the same thing when YouTube came out. People said, oh, will people have enough to produce a only X number of sort of finite number of movies and plots that are there? Now, of course, we all see that the whole medium of how you consume has moved from YouTube and even to TikTok, right? So it's no longer 3 minute, 5 minute, it is 60 seconds of reels. And that's how much is sort of being produced. Again, you can argue that 95% of it is not something which you would use, but it's still generating a lot of that. Good question, Rajiv. Yeah.
Okay, so we go to Jyoti Lahari. Jyoti? And Anand, we may extend by a couple of minutes.
Sure.
I hope
Yeah,
you're
that should be
okay
fine.
with
Yeah.
that. Yeah. Jyoti?
Thanks, Sushma. Thanks,
Yeah.
Sushma. Anand, hi. Oh, that was wonderful. Quick question. I'm moving away from operational efficiency into board governance. And I was just wondering if, as a board, of course, you can ask AI to draft a crisis management plan, it'll give it to you. But beyond that, if you want to put AI in the center of a crisis management plan, is there a way to do that? Or are there use cases that you can generally refer to? Of course, you don't have to be specific.
Yeah. No, AI at the board level, I think it's sort of more at the board level, I think it is more strategic, it is more governance related. There are AIs that look at it from a strategic perspective, do quite a lot of the analysis that you would. Now, I forgot the name of the company, but there's a very specific example. It's a Singapore-based company, which it's not now. I think it is in the maybe 2016, 17 onwards. They have had AI on the board, right? So what do I mean by AI on the board? I think they have 10 board members. It's a company that constantly, I think it's constantly looks for acquisitions, M&A. Now, the 9 human board members have their vote on whether to buy or not, right? At what price. And then they also have an AI which goes through the due diligence very much. I mean, they've been doing this for the past 10 years, right? So with older technology, I don't know where they are now in terms of using some of these, but you can definitely use some of these things to say, hey, what is your considered opinion on this particular company based on all the things that we as a company do? And then you can take that as one vote for the company, right? So again, it's just one vote and you can decide how much importance you want to give to that. But to your broader question, I think these kinds of AI are now becoming very practical, very useful for the boards to actually do the governance. So as an advisor, as a consultant. Now, one of the things that I talk about is we as humans are very bad at documenting our decisions and then going back and looking at it and saying, was it a good decision? Not now on hindsight, of course, you're looking at it in hindsight. At that point in time, given everything that we knew, was that a good decision? Now, on hindsight, was it a good decision? What else could we have done? What else could we have known at that point in time to have made a better decision? So we don't introspect on our decisions enough. Now, I think these AIs will be a great tool for the boards to have as, hey, this is what we are doing as a company. These are the decisions that we took. And for the board to come back a year from now and said, hey, we think that the market was going to go this way. Market ended up going this way. Could we have known this? Could we have predicted it? What else should we have known at that point in time to have been better prepared, right? So you said crisis management, right? So what else could we have known, right? So that I think would be a useful exercise in a very practical sense, right? So, and board meetings are one of the few areas where companies do document the decisions, and the decisions obviously tend to be consequential decisions. We are not talking about operational decisions. We are looking at very strategic or governance or risk kind of decisions, sort of very strategic decisions. So that's a good way of using it. I've not really seen companies use it in the way that I just talked about, right? So I think that's still in the early days, but I've built AI which can look at strategic decisions. I think that's what needs to happen for the board to have a more considered view and to use these as tools, right? So again, board members come from very different perspectives. imagine a board member assistant, and all these AIs of these board members are essentially coming up with the different points of view. And often groupthink is one of the things that we as humans need to worry about, and it'll be good to get these kind of AI to act as the one of my colleagues called it the devil's advocate. He actually wrote a book on the devil's advocate, where you specifically nominate one of the senior leadership team members as a devil's advocate, and that devil's advocate role needs to rotate in the senior management group. So that way people are more critical on their own choices, that they don't get into the groupthink. That could happen with the board as well. So I think having these kinds of tools to be the quote unquote critique of what we are doing, so that we expose some of the follies of our thinking, would be a great way to use it.
So I knew setting up this topic that even an hour and a half is not going to be sufficient. I know a lot of people asked questions. I think we've tried to answer most of them. But if there are a few more, what we are going to do is to review it and send answers back, or we'll publish it in our community. Just as a closing remark, please kindly register on Second Careers. Anand, thank you very much for sharing your email.
Yeah.
And those of you who asked for it, we'll share it in case you had to get off the session. But remember, it's expertise and experience, and it's a combination of the two. So please use it in very measured doses. And we will continue to keep bringing very interesting insights from experts and people who are very experienced. Thank you very much.
Thank you, everyone. Thanks for staying.
Thank you.